All right, hi, it's Laura, and we are working on the fourth project of 2025, and this one is making a fabric cover for a journal or book. Now, on the fifth project, I'm going to show you a fun page to go inside this book, but today we're just going to start out with making a cover that you'll use a fabric cover and some rings that open up. Now, back in the old days, when I first started doing mini books back in the 2000s, a lot of us were using rings before we started doing other kinds of bindings and such. And so I have a huge number of rings in a variety of sizes, and it really doesn't matter which size you want to use. You can do this sort of book. And to start with, what I did is I used a piece of heavy duck canvas. This is very similar to the canvas that's used when you're going to paint, like an oil painting or acrylic painting on a stretched canvas. It's the same kind of canvas that's used on that. In fact, you can buy that kind of canvas and stretch canvases yourself. But this is just a duck canvas that you can get at any fabric store, big box fabric store, that sort of thing. And it's just a little bit heavier of a weight, and that works great for this project. With it, I determine what size I want my book to be, and you want to allow, it's basically from about here to here is what my page size is, and then I add a little bit on there. So I'm planning in this book, let's see, where's 6 inches? So 6 inches is right here. So if I came in 6 inches, here's the edge of where the binding is. So I made it a little bit longer than my pages are going to be. And my pages are going to be about 4 to 4.5. And I made this, well, originally started out, I was making it 5. Yeah, so it is 5. So 5 inches, and then you'll understand in a second how to determine how much longer. But my pages, if I'm making them in the 4 to 6 size range. So I'm making my book about 5 inches because I like that little extra. And the main part of the book is about a little over 7. So give or take about an inch longer than your pages are and an inch taller than your pages are. And that just gives you some breathing room. Then to determine how long this part's going to be, because I have to put it together to show you how this all works, but determine this length, you're going to take whatever size ring that you want to use. So for this one, the ring size that I used, if you measure it across, it's 1.5 inches across. So whatever your diameter is across, you're going to double that. So this is 1.5 inches. So I made this distance 3 inches. So between this piece and this section are the same length. Whoops, I'm probably off camera. So the front section and the back section are the same length. And then I'm adding 3 inches. If I wanted to use a little bit smaller ring like these, this one measures 1 1/8 inches. So I would make it 2 1/4. So I do, what did I say? 7 inches. 7 inches, and I'd only do 2 1/4 rather than the 3 that I'm doing with those rings. Or with this one, which measures across 1 3/4, so that one would be 2.5 or 3.5 is how wide I would make my spine section. So you're going to do 1 inch wider and 1 inch longer than your page size for the front and for the back. And then you're going to do the same height as you did on these, but the width-wise is going to be the width across or the diameter of your ring times 2. So not a lot of math that needs to be done. So for instance, because I'm using these rings, which were 1.5 inches, so my spine section is 3 inches plus 7 and plus 7. So 14 and 3 is 17. So I cut this 17 inches long out of my canvas, and I cut it 5 inches tall because my pages are 4 inches plus the 1 inch, so 5. So that is how you determine how long you want it. If you're making a taller, narrower book, same math. Whatever size your page is this way, add an inch. Whatever size your page is this way, add an inch, and then add the center based on the size of your ring. So you can make your book any size you want. Then to my canvas, I stitched on a variety of scraps, strips, that sort of thing, and I just stitched it directly to the canvas, making sure that this center section where my spine is fell within kind of my area where it's mirrored on the front and the back. Then I originally was going to do this as the front, but I liked how this looked better with these strips, so I did that. On the front then I added a little flower that is just stitched on, that's just raw edge. You could also do one of the badges like we did on the last thing. You could do it, maybe simplify your cover a bit and put one of the badges. So I got all that stitching done, give it a nice press, and then I cut out the lining piece. So the lining is not attached down the way these pieces are stitched down. So the lining is only attached around the edges. This blue piece I needed it a little bit longer, so I added some strips. And then I took a piece of this stripe that wrapped from the inside where I stitched it down to the outside, and then it zigzagged. So I zigzagged around the entire perimeter to hold it together. You could do it in a much more finished fashion if you wanted to do that, but I kind of liked having this raw edge with a more folded over finished edge here. That's the way the book is going to open. So you can then attach this down. Then in the center, you're going to create a piece based on your measurements. Remember, we're at 3 inch because we have an 1.5 inch wide ring. So this inside piece, which is a separate piece from everything else, that is the width that is twice your ring size. So this is 3 inches because I have 1.5 inch ring. With the 1 1/8 ring, it would be 2 1/4. And with the 1 3/4 inch ring, it would be 3 1/2. So just depends on the size of your ring. It's double your diameter. It's going to give your width. Then, based on your height, you need to determine how many rings that you want to have. Now, if I were doing a book this height, I still might only want to have 3 rings. So I'd put one in the center and then probably close to the top and the bottom. Or you could do 4 rings. You just can determine your own spacing. But I would have the center of the first ring, top and bottom, be about 1/2 inch in. Then I'm going to sew these little channels. Now, you could do this by hand if you don't have a machine. You just want to make nice, tight little stitches. But each of these channels is approximately 3/8 of an inch wide. That allows for your ring to go through. Now, if your ring has, at this hinge, is a little thicker, because some of them can be a little thicker, you may want to increase the width of your channel to be a little bit wider. I would not go less. I sewed it at first at about 1/4 inch. Didn't work very well. So you might want to make sure you're doing it at least a 3/8 of an inch. If you want to pop it up to 1/2 inch, it makes it a little easier to slide the rings through. But that's what we're going to be doing, is in these channels, these narrower channels, I'm going to fish these rings then through. And you start at one end, and it gets a little tricky as you get a little ways in. So you kind of got to maneuver it a little bit as you're pushing it in, especially when you get to where the joint is getting through. So you might have to kind of wiggle it around a little to get it through. The other place where it gets a little challenging is where this edge is folded over of this inside piece. I have that folded over and stitched down, so it wants to catch under this little flap. So I kind of have to put something in there to make sure it clears that. So the rings are just feeding through, so you get them through to where they're approximately centered. And I had 2 blues and 2 greens, so I went with, why don't I go through this end? I went with 2 blues and 1 green because I didn't have 3 of any one color. So then when you get to where this joint is trying to feed in, wiggle it a little bit and it goes right in. And then you get down to this end and make sure that it's not getting caught underneath. And then that comes on through. Work this guy through to the middle. And then our last one. Wiggle around a little bit till it comes out. There. So then I can go ahead and close my rings up. So just like we used to do those ring-bound books, but now they're covered with a fabric spine over them and over the cover. So then this will flip back. Your pages will hook onto the rings. Now, you can do fabric pages. You can do little quilt pages. You can do paper pages. Or you can combine them. They'll just need some way to hook onto the rings, whether we're making punching holes like you would on paper, or small buttonholes if your sewing machine can make buttonholes, or you can hand make buttonholes, or we can put in grommets. We can use paper clips to make a ring that hooks on there. And we'll be talking about that a bit on the project number 5 as I'm showing you how to make a fabric page to go in here. But you'll just put them, get them all centered, but you'll just be able to open your rings up and put your pages on, close the rings back up again, and then I'll fit inside the cover. Now, if you didn't want loosey-goosey floppy covers, you could also, as long as you're clear of this section or where this spine, inside spine section is, you could put a piece of chipboard inside this part so then you could have a rigid cover. You would probably want it to be short by about, a 1/4 inch or so of this seam edge right here. So you'd come in about 1/4 inch. So like right about here. So you'd want to cut your chipboard even a little shorter than that so that you could run a stitch line so it's not going to slide around. So you could make that a harder cover than just with the heavy duck canvas. But I kind of like the soft cover on it. So once we add some pages to the inside, it's going to be a fun book, whether we're doing paper pages. I was kind of looking at these guys. These are too big to go in here. But if I had a stack of pages, I could have, excuse me, grommets or rings or something so that these all hooked in. But once they're all in, it's going to just make a nice cover for those kind of pages. So anyway, fun thing to do. Super quick, super easy. You could also do it out of the canvas. If you didn't want to put all of this piecing, fabric piecing on the outside like I've done, you could keep it the canvas. You could paint on it, stamp, stencil, whatever you wanted to do. And then the only part you would need to do is stitch on the inside spine in twice the diameter of your rings. Stitch that onto the center and then feed those through. Now, one thing you want to do is when you're stitching these channels is you're going to want to back tack a couple of stitches at each end because that's where it's going to take some stress. Now here where it's open, I'm going to hand tack that down on each side just to tack that down. But it's a fun way to make a quick and easy cover for a quick and easy book, ring-bound books. So anyway, fun and easy, and hopefully you'll enjoy that. Thanks a bunch.